It's really my very, very distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker today. And I must apologize to him and to you that I have to go talk to a deputy secretary in a little while, so I'll be walking out in the middle of his talk. But Harold is, as you all know, the third director of the laboratory, also one of the people who was here during the Manhattan Project, who has so much insight into the laboratory and what it did historically. But I must tell you, he's also rather up to date on what's going on now. And so we'll get a chance to talk about that tomorrow while he's still here. And I don't know that he needs more of an introduction to that, to you that we're all fascinated to hear about his experiences and his insights. Harold.
Thanks, Mike. What you doing? I never thought I'd ever be introduced at Los Alamos by a former Livermore lab director. Somebody's going to tell you how to get out of here.
Yeah, I think most of us here are probably familiar with the evacuation routes. We'll just go back through the doors that you came in, and let's see, where's the...
Thank you.
And to the left, and out the doors, and I think we'll be okay. Thank you all very much for coming out today, and I'm going to turn it back over to Harold.
Thank you. You can turn that. I'm going to start way back and then come forward. And I do appreciate questions because in this Heritage series, you know, you're starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel. There aren't many of us good or bad apples left anymore in that barrel. Things really started and go very rapidly in '32 when the neutron was discovered. Fortunately, fission wasn't discovered till about 6 years later. Now you may say, why is that fortunate? Well, remember during that period, 32 to 38, most of all nuclear physics was in Germany. And our military prowess, or whatever you want to call it, was essentially zilch during that time. And we really didn't know what was going on in Germany. And had they chosen, they had the expertise to really done something. Fortunately, fission didn't start till '38. They were well involved in other endeavors. They put their efforts into rocketry, and that helped us for a long time. Now, I guess it was in '38. See, my hero in all this business is really Fermi, and I'm going to explain why. He was most unusual individual. You hear lots about other people today, and I'm not saying that they weren't key players and they made great contributions, but Fermi was really a unique individual. I guess it was in the early '40s when the project really started in sort of a way. There were 3 places in the United States which were involved in what we call nuclear physics. There was actually only one textbook. It was by a man named Rossetti, who was one of Fermi's teammates. Berkeley, because of Lawrence and the cyclotron. Chicago, because of its with Compton and cosmic rays. And Columbia with Dunning. And in '38, when Fermi got the Nobel Prize, he got out of Italy. At Columbia, they have some very interesting documents of correspondence between Fermi and the people at Columbia, Pegram in particular, where he's trying to figure out a way of getting out of Italy. See, his wife's family were Jewish. In fact, his father-in-law was one of the most famous Italian admirals. His name was Boccone, and he ended up in Auschwitz, even though he was a 4-star, very famous admiral. And Fermi is writing, he can write to Columbia about trying to figure out how he can get a position. They wanted him. But in his correspondence, it's interesting, he says, please do not send anything to me. And he gives another address and another name. So the letter's coming back from Columbia. and this was in the 36, 37 period, wouldn't come to Fermi, but would come to this third person, second person, and then who would give the letters to Fermi. When he got the Nobel Prize, Mussolini let him and the family leave, and they just kept coming. And they came to Columbia, lived in Leonia, New Jersey, I think it was called. Anyway, as I mentioned, there were these three places where nuclear physics was sort of being conducted in the way it used to be in those days. I was at the University of Denver, and strangely enough, University of Denver was tied in with the University of Chicago, because the University of Chicago was the center for cosmic rays, and the University of Denver had the high-altitude cosmic ray station on top of Mount Evans. So there was a great interplay between the University of Chicago and physics department at the University of Denver. And the chairman of the department, a man named Joyce Stearns, had been a Chicago graduate. And what happened was, shortly after Pearl Harbor, when most of us signed up, my wife and I signed up to join the Army Air Corps, and we were just about to be inducted when Joyce Stearns, who was the chairman, said, "Don't sign anything. I want you to come with me to Chicago." And this is the way most of the people had been recruited. Those who had graduated from the University of Chicago, who were professors or instructors at various universities, were called up by Compton or the person who was in charge then, who came from Phillips Petroleum, a man named Richard Doan, who had been a student at the University of Chicago, physicist working for Phillips Petroleum. They were all called back, and they were told if they had any living students who weren't too stupid and hadn't been drafted yet, to bring them. So at these three centers, people congregated. Now, leading up to this, Oppie had been given the job of sort of coordinating what was going on at those institutions, looking forward to the formation of the Manhattan Project. And his gopher, and I'm not using that in a derogatory term, was John Manley from the University of Illinois. And John Manley was handling the experimental work that was going on, just coordinating it. And Oppie was handling the theoretical work, coordinating it. Anyway, I ended up at Chicago, essentially took a number, and I was assigned to work with somebody named Fermi. I'd never heard of Fermi, I'd never heard of a neutron. And I was immediately sent with John Manley up to Columbia University, where Fermi was conducting his first little exponential pile, which is a big cube of graphite. And with us up there was Elizabeth Graves and Al Graves, who handled the test division here for years. Diz Graves handled she was in P division. And she was one of the first ones to think about using solid state detectors as detectors for radiation. It never came to be during her time, but she had this idea. Anyway, we were up at Columbia and working on this pile. We would insert indium foils. There was a radium beryllium source in the center of the thing. And what Fermi was doing was figuring out the slowing down process. And really, Fermi invented the concept in reactors where you try to slow down the neutrons so you minimize the capture in 238 and maximize the capture in 235. So the lattice idea in reactors came from Fermi. Anyway, we were doing these experiments and they really weren't going very well as I think Fermi had hoped. And he thought maybe it was due to nitrogen capture in the air in this graphite assembly, so we completely encapsulated the graphite assembly in galvanized tin. Just put a big tin can around it, and we put vacuum pumps on it, pumping on it all the time. I actually wore a tie then. Everybody wore ties. and it caught my tie in this old Senko pump in the big wheel, and it was going up and down, up and down. God, all the things now that aren't allowed. But physics was really fun then. You know, O-rings had not been invented. Now think about that. So everything was shellac, Gliptol, APAs on cue. That's the way you put things together. Anyway, we were doing this experiment and it still didn't work very well, so Fermi said, well, we're going to increase the hydrogen. So this was in the middle of Columbia campus. I think it was on the 3rd floor of either Schermerhorn or Pupine, I can't remember which building. And we had these propane tanks and we're going to put it in this tin can. You know, it was a big tin can, about 8 foot cube. And Elizabeth Grave says, well, Enrico, we can get it in, but how are we going to get it out? Because it's an explosive mixture. Well, we didn't do it, and he called up Sam Allison at the University of Chicago and said, we want to move the experiment down to Chicago. And so Allison talked to Hutchins, and they decided to put start CP1, which was the first reactor, under a stag field in the racket course or squash court, whatever it was. So that's how we moved down there. We were supposed to go to Argonne, but there was a strike at Argonne, and they were way behind, so that's why we went to the University of Chicago. So the whole gang of us moved back down there under Fermi. Now, in the meantime, while we were constructing CP1, Fermi, Wigner, and Manson Benedict were designing the Hanford reactors. Just amazing what was going on all at the same time. And so we were assigned various jobs. One of the things which interesting, it shows, this was taken 5 years after, but it shows some of the key guys. I don't know if this must be one of those things. Yeah. That's Sam Allison. I don't know if you've ever, it's too long ago for you. Compton and Allison was the big book on for physics then. This guy named Hilbrand, it's me, Fermi. Wally Zinn. Zinn started combustion engineering. Al Wattenberg, he's at the University of Illinois. Leona Marshall Woods, Szilard, Herb Anderson, Marv Wilkening, Warren Nyer, I think that's Bob Noble. I can't remember his name. Lichtenberger worked with, now the name's gone again, I just told it to you. It's Wally Zinn. Zinn was a Canadian, and Sturm was his name. But anyway, this is a group of us about 5 years after the first pile was brought into being. Anyway, we moved down to Chicago, and twice a week Fermi would give lectures. I mentioned some of these things because some of the characters. Now Szilard, who with Fermi started a lot of this. Szilard was responsible for the letter that went to Roosevelt to get the program started in the first place. Szilard was really a weird guy, I thought, a very amazing person, but for instance, Fermi lectured twice a week in the evening, started at 7, went to 9, explaining slowing down, everything relevant to reactor technology. But in order to attend the lecture, there was a pad and you signed your name that you went to the lecture. Szilard refused to sign that. He had the feeling we weren't going to win the war, okay? He was not associated. But in order to hear the lecture, he got a chair, put it out in the hall, and had the door open. Another Szilardism. When I was, after I left here and went back to graduate school, I was living with Herb Anderson, couldn't find a place to live, and I slept on a couch in a carriage house that he had rented. And every night, Szilard would come over from the faculty club. This was right behind the University of Chicago faculty club. And a bunch of guys would sit around, gals, just talking. One night he announced that he had applied to get his fingerprints back. And people wanted to know why. He said, well, I might want to resort to a activity of crime, and I don't want to be handicapped. Most amazing character. Well, the project was started, and I'm going to show you some documents. This was the whole arrangement. Now you see, Doan was the director. Stearns, who had been head of the physics department at the University of Denver, was the associate director. And then they had these groups. Allison was a supervisor. Fermi and Wigner were called counselors up here. Now Fermi was really in charge of what was going on, but he couldn't be in charge because he was an enemy alien. See, he was not a citizen yet. But there's no question he was in charge. He has these various groups. Mitchell came from the University of Indiana. Some of these names you will remember or will recognize. And then John Manley was there with Liz Graves, and this was Bob Nobles. Whitaker came from Vanderbilt. Al Graves was in his group with Warren Nyer. Bob Walker. Bob Walker came here and then went back to Caltech, retired, passed on, lived in Santa Fe. Herb Anderson said beryllium source experiments with Grant Kuntz, who was here, myself. Bob Wilson, who went to GE. Louis Slotin, he was our first fatality, if you remember. Johnny Wheeler, Bob Christie, the Christian Biome, Al Weinberg. Now down here it says in chemical, Segre. Segre didn't come. Art Wall was part of that group. Segre never came, but Seaborg came. So that was the team. So there's not very many people when you think about it compared with what we have today on any project. Now, one of the first things that happened was they decided to classify things. This is the original memo from Compton saying it's a Compton of a, he's saying attached is a copy of a memo from Gregory Bright, who's going to be in charge of security, and he just says this is the way it's going to be. Now, after I show the next one, I'm going to try to have something happen. This was the part of the rules that Gregory Bright put out. Gregory Bright, who was a Bright-Wigner formula, very bright individual, but he was not a very sensible person. He insisted upon compartmentalization. Fermi said no compartmentalization. And that's something that Oppie also did when he was here. He says, we're all part of a team. We'll take ideas from everybody. Everybody has to know what's going on. And Bright left. So Bright was no longer around, which was fortunate. Had Bright prevailed, I don't think we would have made the progress we made or the congeniality that we had among everybody working. Mentions there that I was part of the radium, it said radium beryllium. Now Herb Anderson worked 2 shifts. He took the night shift in building the pile, CP1. In the day shift, he just did other things, one of which was working with sources, measuring slowing down in graphite and paraffin, things like that. Now the sources we used were radium beryllium, loose powder. We used to have them here too, little brass capsules. We had no radiation monitoring equipment. You didn't worry about such things. You just tried to handle things quickly. Herb wondered, since we're always taking these sources, they were 1 gram radium sources, in and out. You just picked them up and then you put them in a lead pig, and then you picked them up and put them back in this box. But there's no shielding around the boxes where we're doing this modulation stuff. Anyway, Herb thought that since they were loosely packed, what we should do is compress the radium beryllium, make a pellet so that it wouldn't keep maybe changing the mixing between the radium chloride or bromide, what it was, and the beryllium. So he told me, he gave me a block of beryllium, says, make some filings, we're going to make a radium beryllium source. And he designed a little die. He was an amazing guy. a die and with a hand press, and we took it up to the Iridium Corporation of America in New York City. Showed up with our little bag of beryllium, and we had a hot plate in the middle of the room, and we put measurement. We'd practice a lot making dry pellets using regular bromium, sodium bromide, or substitutes for the radium chloride or radium bromide, whatever it was we actually ended up with. And they brought out a vial of this liquid, and we poured it on the beryllium powder and stirred it around over this hot plate on a little Coors evaporating dish and evaporated it to dryness. Then we put it in our little die, pressed the pellet, took it out, put it in this little brass cylinder, soldered the top on, put it in a mayonnaise jar with some Kleenex, put the lid on. That was so we could test the paper, Kleenex paper, when we got back to see if the thing had been leaking. Put it on under our seat. In those days, you put your bags under your seat on the airplane and flew back to Chicago. And that's all there was to it. No problem. Since that time, Al Rottenberg has made a lot of sources, and nothing ever happened to him. Now, on the matter of secrecy, I'm going to have him play an audio. Now, what this audio is you're going to hear two people. I'm not sure which will come first. Maybe the first is Laura Fermi, and she's saying that she never knew what was going on the whole time. Enrico never told her what was going on. The second will be Fermi talking, explaining that the idea of secrecy wasn't on the part of the military or the government. It was the scientists who started the secrecy in technical work related to what was going on. So if you can play that first one.
Mrs. Fermi remembers.
They imposed secrecy on themselves, and then I didn't hear anything for years until the Smythe report was ready. Then one day we were still in Los Alamos, so it must have been 1945 still. Enrico came with a mimeographed copy of the Smythe report and said, maybe you are being interested in reading this, and he didn't volunteer any help, so it was pretty hard going, but then I understood what had gone on, why the secrecy, the pile, we didn't know anything about the pile.
10 years after the secrecy, Enrico Fermi himself dispelled some of the misconceptions about who imposed the secrecy.
Secrets in science did not exist to any appreciable extent before the war. The military importance of science appears to have brought the necessity of at least some amount of secrecy. In this respect, perhaps, many people believe that keeping secret results in the field of atomic fission that could lead to the development of the atomic bomb was imposed on the scientists by the military authorities. The truth is quite different, and the first agreements to keep certain results confidential were entered into freely among scientists in this country long before the government or the armed services manifested any interest in the matter.
Okay, anyway, just to clarify it, we're responsible for what we've inflicted upon ourselves, and it's all the rules that are made today. Unfortunately, today, most of the people who make the rules really don't understand what's secret or what isn't secret, or what should be secret, what isn't secret. But you have to follow the rules, otherwise you get in deep trouble. So follow the rules. Let me see where we're going. Oh, here's the whole picture of us. Well, let me back up. When we came to Los Alamos and started various groups, actually the first thing I did from Chicago, my wife and I, and Ted Jorgensen, we went with John Manley to the University of Illinois, where he had a Cockcroft-Walton. And we took the Cockcroft-Walton apart and shipped it out here. And it was put in Z building, where we did scattering experiments the whole time during the build-up period. As I mentioned, the thing had been put together with sealing wax, shellac, APAs on Q, Gliptol. So you had to be very careful taking it apart. My wife came with us, and she did the manifests and wrote down all the parts, and we boxed it all up and shipped it out here. At the same time, they were shipping the cyclotron from Harvard and the Van der Graafs from Wisconsin, I guess, the two Van der Graafs, the short tank and the long tank. So all this stuff came here. When I arrived, I drove up in a Wilson storage van, stake body truck, and on the back was our boxes of our accelerator, which we put together in Z building. And as I mentioned, we did these experiments all the time. Then, when the time came and we started to get serious, we formulated, of course, it was called Project Alberta. I never knew that was the name of the group. But when we were going to go overseas, Louis Alvarez, who was the most amazing guy, and who was Larry Johnson, you've been very fortunate in hearing these heritage talks. You had Leon Smith, who's with us today, who gave a superb talk. Larry Johnson talked about how he did work on initiators. He actually had been a student with Alvarez, which is how he came. I think he'd been at MIT. Alvarez actually invented the GCA, ground controlled approach, so that people could land in bad weather independent of their ability to see. Most amazing guy. But Louis had the idea that if we're going to drop these things, maybe they wouldn't work, we ought to try to measure the yield. So he put out a call for volunteers to join him to go overseas. Turned out, well, Larry Johnson was part of Louis' team, so that was no question. I was the only volunteer. Very strange. So there was myself, well, there was Professor Waldman, who had been head of the physics department at Notre Dame, but I mean among the grunts, I was the volunteer. So there were the three of us who made these trips. Louis, Larry Johnson, myself to Hiroshima, where we measured the yield. Actually, Louis, who was the best at it was a very complicated thing to do, to get your transmitter to come on and then to find it, to get the right frequency so that you could be recording what was on there. Louis didn't get it. Larry and I did. Now, when Larry Johnson talked, he talked about on the second mission how we felt that we had two SEDs with us, Ken Kupferberg and Walter Goodman, and we were uncomfortable since they hadn't done any of this stuff, sending them off by themselves, so he said one of us had to go. Well, Larry didn't mention, he did go, but the reason he went is we drew straws, and he lost. But he did a really fine job. But this was our whole gang, and it's sort of interesting. Some of the people are here. Well, when Leon Smith talked, he talked about these characters. Broad. Ed Dahl. This is Ed Dahl, and this is, no, that's Ed Dahl, and that's, I forget his name. Roger Warner. Yeah, Roger Warner, thank you. And this is Harlow Russ, who was one of the gun guys. There's Admiral Parsons, or at that time he was Captain Parsons. There's Ashworth. Ashworth really was Parsons' gopher. Now this is not a derogatory, but he really was Parsons' gopher. He took care of things, running around getting sights, getting things done and everything. And he was the height of sartorial perfection. If you've ever seen any pictures of him, you know, he had the scrambled eggs on his hat and his pants were always creased. You'll see some pictures of us. We were rather grungy, but I think he was lieutenant commander, which was pretty high in those days. And the Navy, if you ever have to join the services during the war, join the Navy. They control the reefers, which control the food. They had lettuce. The Navy, I had a friend who was in the Navy, and once in a while I get invited down. They were in the middle of Tinian Island, and I'd get invited down to have dinner with them. They had tablecloths, they had napkins, and they had people who took care of them. And then afterwards, they would move back things and have their movie inside the dining hall, whereas we were sitting outside, and when it rained, you couldn't even hear the sound. It was so hard. So join the Navy. Each one Each one had in their quarters, had a refrigerator with cases of Coke and everything. We were rationed. We ate, in one of these trays when they slopped the stuff on it. And when you got done, you put it in a boiling 50-gallon can of water to semi-sterilize it, I guess. Here's Bob Serber, who wrote, there's Bernie Waldman from Notre Dame, Larry Langer from Indiana, Louis Alvarez, there's Larry Johnson, there I am. Raymer Schreiber is here someplace, there. Ray Schreiber, who was deputy director here for a long time. There's Barney O'Keefe, who became a big shot in EG&G. Charlie Baker, Morrison. There's Bill Penny, who became the first head of the Atomic Energy Commission in the UK, became Lord Penny before he passed away. Admiral Parnell. Anyway, this was our whole team. And there's Norman Ramsey, who was the head for us, and Parsons was the head of the military there. But boy, today you couldn't have done it with such a small group. These people put together the bomb, built the bomb. It was hand-built out there. There was all the fusing and firing, checking the detonators and everything. A few of us went on the mission. But this was the whole gang. We were not to fraternize with the 509th, with the military. We were in a segment by ourselves because of the secrecy. And except perhaps for Tibbets and eventually for Sweeney, who was a pilot in the Nagasaki and was our pilot, most of them didn't know what was going on. They were looked down upon by the other people out there, the other Air Corps people, because they really didn't fly the missions these other poor guys were doing. It was quite a sobering thing to see the planes that took off every day or every third day. As I'll show you some pictures, there were like 400 B-29s just on our field. It was the largest airfield in the world. And there was another airfield on Saipan and another airfield on the south end of our island. This is the cemetery. The Seabees built this thing. Leon and I were fortunate. Last summer, was it? Yeah. We went to Tinian for a sort of a reunion and met some of the Marines who took Tinian. They came from, after taking Saipan, they took Tinian. But it was a cemetery. I think all these people, the graves have been moved to stateside now, but a lot of, mostly Seabees here, who fought and built that whole complex, which was amazing. To handle 400 B-29s, 4 big runways, it was amazing. This is a view of the field. You can see all these airplanes on their hard stands. Most amazing, this is where we were looking down on us. You can see the ocean. This is the complex for the 509th. There's a chapel. This is the harbor where the Indianapolis brought the little boy uranium, and of course it was sunk later on. One of the worst naval losses that we've ever experienced because they were under secrecy and nobody missed them. This is a picture. Don't ever try to help the feds. I'm holding, no, it's, be honest, but don't try to help, because I was holding, this is interesting, we had a Quonset hut, and we were using the first half of the Quonset hut, and when the Nagasaki plutonium core came, well, where are they going to put it? Well, they just put it in the back of our Quonset hut, just so it's there. Well, I wanted to take my picture with it, so we got it out. This guard was there then, and I took my picture. Now, after the war, I was back at Chicago, and the feds came by and said they thought I had classified material, and they wanted to go through it. So they went through everything. There was nothing there. So trying to help, I said, I had these slides, and they'd gone through them. I said, well, maybe this is what you're looking for. And they want to know what it was. And I told them this was the Nagasaki plutonium core in the carrying container. Oh, yeah, that's it. They hadn't a clue as what I was talking about, and they wanted my slide. And I said, no, I want the slide, but we compromised. If I scratched it out, then it would be okay, and I could keep the slide. So I have the slide. Here I am all dressed up, you see. Now, it's interesting, in this book that you put out, this wonderful book of the lab you have this picture, but it's taken from the back instead of from the front. And I asked the people, why didn't you take it from the front? Because you can see the characters. And they said, well, they didn't have access. They didn't know about this picture. But it's sort of interesting in the following sense. There's Tibbets. Now, you notice nobody's sitting near him. He was really a loner. We certainly didn't fraternize with any of us. Here's Ramsey, who was really in charge for us. There's Admiral Parnell, Captain Parsons. There's Louis Alvarez. There I am. And this is the afternoon when they called us in. I label it pre-strike briefing. They said, okay, we're going to leave tonight. Tomorrow we're going to do our business. But I'm sorry that you didn't have access to this so you could put it in the book showing your former colleagues or who all was in charge. This is Chuck Sweeney, who flew our airplane on Hiroshima and then flew the Nagasaki mission with Ashworth. Now there I am all by myself. No guards or anything. That was before they found out that we would just walk out with the thing. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? It was the only one we had, and there it was. It's really weird. You've seen this maybe. This is the four of us with our canister. One of these, which was recovered, is in the museum in Hiroshima, one of the canisters. It was an ingenious thing taken from a Caltech development which was used as in a target which they pulled behind a plane and people shot at it. It detected a shock wave, and there were two of these facing each other, and if the bullet went on this side, it would record if it went on that side, and the amplitude of the shock wave from the bullet going by told them how far it was from the device. And we had adopted this thing with the help from Panofsky at Caltech to change the time constant of the condenser microphone in the grid circuit so we could measure the blast pressure and the amplitude of the pressure. And that's what we dropped by parachute, and all the news reports said the bomb had been dropped by parachute, but it hadn't been. It was these things. Now, this document I've always thought about. It tells us that on August 6th there's going to be a mission. It tells you who's going to go on the weather planes, who's going to the combat strikes, they're called. There's Tibbets, Sweeney, that's our airplane. And it goes down. We had no guns on our airplanes except tail guns. We used to have lots of turrets. There was a turret on top, two turrets on the side, and a turret on the bottom. We had special B-29s, first ones with the reversible props. But all our guns have been taken off to save weight because we were carrying this big load. But the thing that always got me on this, I took this off. I gave the lab an original of this, and it just disappeared. I don't know who got it. But the thing that got me, when it talks about ammunition in the tail gun, but on the bombs, it just says special. It's all, when I saw this on the bulletin board, then the original ones, they had a couple of them around. I took them down, so they're the only ones that exist. This is for the next mission. Nagasaki says the same thing. The bomb load is special. Now I'm just going to show you some pictures. You notice the tail numbers, like letters, R and N and so on. Our original tail numbers were just a black arrow, and you may see some of these later on. This is the night that we took off, and it's sort of interesting. It was sort of like the opening of a drugstore. There's Captain Parsons. Is that Jepson? Jepson. That's Jepson, who was with Parsons. He had the same job that Leon Smith had, but Leon was in Iwo Jima waiting for some. Here's Lawrence, the New York Times, the only correspondent there. That's me looking there. There's Ramsey. I don't recognize anybody else, but this was pre-strike takeoff ceremonies or whatever you want to call it. There are the three of us before we took off. Looked like I'd been eating well. Leon mentioned he wished in his marvelous collection of photos that he'd had some in color. Well, here are a bunch of them. That's Saipan in the background. It's an airplane flying over it. This is our crew. There's Sweeney, our pilot. But it's a thing I hadn't realized because I always sort of considered him very senior, same age I was, 24. Here's a Major Air Corps flying the Nagasaki mission. He's 24 years old. That's the way it was then. Everybody was young. My wife's brother was flying B-26s in France. He was 19. Whoops, there. Now you see, this is the way we were originally. See the black arrow? This is the Enola Gay, this is our plane, this was a backup airplane. And you notice the black arrow. And the night before the raid, Tokyo Rose came on and said, Black Arrow, we know who you are, and what you're up to, and we are ready for you. And this was the day before. And when we went out to our planes that night, we didn't have black arrows anymore. We had numbers and letters like all the other planes on that. I thought it was a little chicken, but that's the way it was. This is an indication of what was happening all the time. Look at the number of B-29s taking off. In fact, a lot of the problems they had with loss of B-29s was what they called today friendly fire. There were so many of them, so thick, that if they were firing at Jap planes, they would shoot each other. It was bad business. This was after they came back. Tibbetts congratulating Sweeney, or self-congratulations. This is Charlie Baker and Mort Kamak. Charlie was in part in charge of the nuclear assembly. And after the war, the military really didn't know what was going on, at least General Spots and the people down in Central 20th Air Force headquarters. And they all came up to get a briefing. And Charlie Baker was the person who was designated to give this briefing. And it was quite interesting to see these guys come in. Here comes Spots, I guess he was 4-star. They all had beautiful uniforms in those days. If you've ever seen I guess called them pinks, that the Army Air Corps wore. Just gorgeous, really nice uniform with swagger sticks, you know. They come all marching in almost like a pyramid with this general and then 3 stars and then 2 stars and colonels. And they get this briefing from Charlie Baker. And Charlie has the empty carrying case for the Nagasaki bomb. And he says, this is what we got. We think it's around 15,000 tons from this. And it's actually, even today, to me, I may understand the arithmetic to really understand how you can get that much energy that quickly from that small amount of material. Anyway, Charlie went through this, and Spots and his guys stood there. And they looked at that, you know, and they were used to all these missions with these 500,000-pound bombs. And finally, Spots said, young man, you may believe that, but I don't. And turned around and walked out. So, here's one of the fat men being loaded out there, carried around. We did drop leaflets. This is an example of the leaflet saying that, you know, we had this thing and you guys ought to surrender. Nothing ever happened. This is Lord Penny working hard. This is Bob Serber, who passed away recently. Now this is interesting. This is a short snorter. I don't know if any of your parents ever told you about short snorters. But it was common during the war to have a dollar bill that your friends, people signed. But you notice that this bill is different. See, it says Hawaii on it. After the Japanese took over Guam and the Marianas, they, of course, grabbed all the currency. We weren't sure what was going to happen. So they reissued all currency for Hawaii West, that you only had this kind of currency, so it couldn't be used anyplace else. It's sort of interesting. This is signed by lots of people. And here's the backside. You see it has Hawaii up across the back of it. I don't know if anybody, there's Larry Johnson, there's Tibbet's signature, I signed it. Bernie Waldman, Bob Serber, the Bean, Bombardier, Tibbet's. I guess I should put it on eBay and get rich, I don't know. This is the Hirohiro's radio transcript. And in retrospect, at Tinian, I gave a little speech. I said, you know, a person that we really are indebted to was this guy, because he overruled the military and said we quit. The military wanted to continue, and had it gone on, Leon mentioned, I still remember seeing this hospital being built, which was almost half a mile long, in the main corridor for 1,000 beds. And there were several of these being built on the island, anticipating casualties from the invasion. So this guy, although I don't know if any of his guys were named Rummy, but anyway, he was a captive of the military, but he had the intestinal fortitude and the knowledge to say, we're going to quit. And he rationalizes it in this speech. And it was the first time in the history of Japan that the populace had ever heard the emperor. And had he not done that, it could well have been a bloody battle. So in retrospect, we and the Japanese people owe him a great deal. Now, Leon mentioned he wished he had some pictures in color to show you how beautiful the water was. So I'm going to just run through some of these quickly. These are some of the old Japanese buildings that were pretty beat up. Here's our beach. You always went swimming without any clothes on. The jungle's like that now. It's completely overrun. They cleared with bulldozers, cleared the runways for this reunion, and the runways are still serviceable. Now here's a picture I took of Fermi, about 2 years before he died, in our backyard. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about things I think that we should remember. He was a very collegial guy. He was down with Maria, the potter. He liked the little kids. He liked young people. We had the fortune of living with the Fermis because I couldn't find a house to stay in. He had a big house, and he said, well, I was going to be a graduate student, hopefully, eventually, if I could pass the tests. And that's another story. We've had 4 Nobel laureates in our little class of physics at Chicago at that time. And they weren't the smart ones. The smart ones were Darwin and Rosenbluth. But they didn't do anything that got them Nobel Prize. But we had 4 of them. The competition was tough. Half the class flunked. That's the way it was done. No names on the exam papers, just a number. So it was all above the board. It was rather terrifying. Tell you lots of stories. But here's an interesting thing about Fermi. He just entered into everything American. In fact, at his house, we used to have square dances. He had there was a ballroom upstairs in this old Chicago house. And once a month, we had square dancing and invite young people in. I had come from Colorado and I sort of knew how to call, so I did that part. When Fermi would have a dinner party, since he was a big shot, he would invite people, and we were living with him. He would tell Laura, he said, well, they're coming, they're coming. Well, we have to get they have to be diluted, was the word he used, so invite some young people. Well, when I first met Fermi, I was intrigued by his pants. He had zippers on all the pockets. He'd come from Italy. I guess he'd heard bad things about Chicago. Well, this was at a party at San Ildefonso. They went down there. San Ildefonso honored him and had some dances for him. And then the group up here put on a square dance. Well, in honoring Fermi, they had whitewashed everything. It hadn't dried. And this, of course, is the Nagasaki picture of Nagasaki. It's interesting. This is signed by Tibbets, Sweeney, Tibbets, and Parsons. Should put this on eBay, I guess. Okay, now I'm going to talk in general about some things, and I hope we can, some of you can stay. At Chicago was a lady named Maria Gephardt Mayer, who received a Nobel Prize for her work on study of the nucleus. Now, she and Fermi were at Chicago at the same time, and they would converse. Now, Maria Mayer, I think she was here part of the time. She was never without a cigarette, absolutely never. When she lectured, she had a cigarette in one hand, chalk in the other, and we used to sit there wondering if she was going to get them mixed up. But Fermi did not like smoking. So Maria would go to Fermi's office to discuss things. And one day, and this is all written down, there's a book about women in science, especially Nobel laureates. And it recounts this. She one day went in with Fermi and said she'd been playing with these numbers of nuclei in the nucleus, protons, neutrons. And it was a strange pattern. She didn't understand how it must have something, there must be some correlation, must be something. And so they had this discussion, and as she was leaving, he says, Maria, have you considered spin coupling, orbit coupling? She went back to her office, half an hour later, come up with the solution, got the Nobel Prize. That's the way Fermi operated. He would say, hey, have you considered it? Now, no one's ever given Fermi credit for that. It wasn't his way of operating. Now, on the Oppenheimer hearings, and a lot of people, Oppie is the patron saint of here. To me, the patron saint of this place is really Bradbury. He put the place together, and he kept it together for 25 years. Now, at the hearings, which were very polarized, had to do with security clearance for Oppie. Now, Oppie did some dumb things, and he broke some rules, and clearly Strauss was out to get him. I've been told by a person who's passed on, who was in the know then, that the person really behind it wasn't really Strauss. He got fed by somebody, and that person was Finletter, who was Secretary of the Air Force, who had compiled a big dossier on Oppenheimer. And perhaps it was because of his opposition to the development of the hydrogen bomb that the Air Force was so unhappy about him. But this was Yvonne Getting, who's passed on, who's a very prominent, sensible guy, and he was in the office of the Secretary of the Air Force. He said it was really Finlander who had started all this. Now, if you read the hearings, it's called In the Matter of J. Robert Oppenheimer, you listen to what Teller said. Teller said what a great job he had done as a lab director. If they had to do it all over again, he would be very much in favor of Oppie being put in charge again. But he said he would be not comfortable with Oppie advising the government. That's all he said. He didn't say it was a security risk or anything like that. But that is why we got the polarization. Now you can say, well, what things had Oppie opposed? Well, it's very interesting. Oppie wanted to close down Los Alamos. He didn't want Los Alamos to continue. I think that would have been very bad. Oppie was against the development of nuclear energy for power. Very strange. Oppie advised against the development of the nuclear-powered submarine. It was really Very strange. And of course, the polarizing thing, as far as we were concerned in that period of 49-50, was opposition to development of the hydrogen bomb. Now, at the beginning, so was Fermi. But I think that was in part because he was part of the GAC, which Oppie was chairing at that time. Anyway, I think Teller took a bad rap. I invited him back. Keith Boyer worked with him quite a bit, and I would say that Keith Boyer's enthusiasm for the potential of lasers is really what started the Livermore program in lasers, because Teller went back all excited about the potential for lasers. They got John Emmett, who I call a golden throat, who was an amazing salesperson and a very good technical person, and they started their laser program, and now they have NIF. But I think it was because of Keith Boyer's work with Teller that started their interest initially in laser. Probably would have happened anyway, but that's sort of the way it was. But that pretty much is all I want to tell you today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay.
That was an absolutely marvelous tour through some of the great moments of Los Alamos history. I know a number of you may have questions. I would ask you to use the microphones in the aisles. That's the only way we can have these questions recorded as part of the record of this wonderful gathering. Okay.
Okay.
Please.
So this question is actually related to your quote that was in Nature magazine about RRW, and they reported that you said, I don't understand why anybody would trust a weapon designed by people who have never designed anything and then manufactured by people who have never made anything.
Oh, this is RRW.
Yes.
Okay.
So my question to you is that, well, I don't necessarily disagree with that, and it'll be a while before we can test again. But so how would a young designer today build credibility?
Oh, I think actually working on designs is a good thing, but the idea that you put anything in the stockpile and rely upon it without testing it, I would not go along with. I've seen too many failures. No matter how, if you're going to build a gun, okay, but I can't see you putting guns on a replacement for the 76.
But we won't be able to go back to full testing for a while.
Well, then you better just, if you have problems, this is my dilemma. You're willing to build something you've never built before, using codes that have never been used before in this context, using materials, let's say, that have never been used before, and then putting it in a stockpile without testing it, instead of rebuilding something that has been tested, that has been built before, that has been made with materials before. You know, given the choice, which would I do? I'd rebuild the old things if I have to. I don't think we're going to have to for a long time, but I'd rather rebuild something that's been tested and we can look at it and compare with things that have been tested than do something that has never been tested. I just believe that I've seen too many, going back to the old World War I or II torpedoes that didn't work because they weren't tested, all sorts of things that they have that just don't work until they've been tested. So I'm saying, fine, it's a great endeavor for the new designers to be challenged, see what they can come up with, but don't put it in the stockpile without testing it. If you test it, fine. If you want to put it in, fine. What we really need to do is get rid of the multiples and have some singles on the D5, because if you're ever going to use something, the idea of having to use, let's say, 6 which is the least we can sort of use today on a salvo, is sort of crazy. We needed some singles on the D5, not multiples. Maybe they'll do that someday. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question more about Fermi rather than anyone else, and since you were a good friend, I forgot if it was told to me or I read somewhere where Fermi predicted the issues of plutonium from Hanford way before.
Oh, that's another thing I wanted to mention, that what he did. Originally, here, the whole effort was on a gun. Plutonium gun, uranium gun, no question about it. And there was no initial work on compressing materials. No lens work, except von Neumann mentioned that if you could compress material, you didn't need as much. And Seth Nettemeyer started trying to do some things using primacord in linear implosions. But there had been no work on implosion at all, and the expertise was not here for that. And it was Fermi who said at one time, we hadn't gotten any plutonium from Hanford yet, but he said, you know, it could well be that the plutonium from Hanford is going to be different than the plutonium we got from an accelerator, because it's been cooking there a long time. It may absorb another neutron, you get 240, that may be a neutron emitter. Well, this caused, it was Fermi that did this, it caused quite a scrambling here, because we had very little 235 coming, and we were anticipating a deluge of plutonium from Hanford. So Fermi put together Segre in charge, one of his students from Italy, although Segre was older than Fermi, George Farwell, Owen Chamberlain, Clyde Wiegand. I think that was the group. We put them out in a canyon, away from any automobile or ignition noises, with a few, I don't know if they had 1 milligram of plutonium from Hanford, first stuff we ever got. And they monitored it for about 2 weeks. And lo and behold, it was a neutron emitter. See, all the work previous to that time on the part of the chemistry division was purifying plutonium of light elements, because of the alpha N reaction would pre-detonate a gun, pre-initiate a gun. So all the chemistry was on purifying it for light elements, which was completely irrelevant later on, because we had 240. And now this is how the whole myth of reactor-grade plutonium came about. It was thought that you couldn't use regular reactor-grade plutonium because of the 240. And even people such as Glenn Seaborg, until he was even chairman, he didn't understand that any plutonium, if you look at the unclassified critical mass tables, pure plutonium 240 has a smaller critical mass than pure 235. Anybody seeing that would say, well, plutonium is plutonium. It's messy, but the critical mass is smaller than 235. So it was Fermi who brought this into being. The whole thing changed around. They brought in Kistikowski. The key to the implosion device was a paper that the Brits brought on how to make a lens using a fast-burning and a slow-burning explosive. And that paper, it's still in, it used to be in the library, it's unclassified, from the Brits, was the key to making our first lenses. And then we really geared up because plutonium was the name of the game. But again, it was Fermi, and I think it was Fermi on the radiation. He was a most amazing guy. And, you know, he was known as the Pope. And there was a reason for that. He was the authority. And had he lived, I think his recognition in this country would have been much greater. He's clearly recognized in Europe, especially in Italy, for all the things he did. They had a big celebration of what would have been his 100th birthday some years ago. And the papers that he did in electrodynamics, mathematics, just everything. I remember asking him, well, I asked him, being terrified of taking this exam with these other colleagues, well, you know, what did you read? What should I read? He said, I don't know, I don't read. I said, well, how do you know all these things? He said, people come and tell me. But he says, you know, it's very interesting. Most of the time, when people come to tell me about things, explain things to me, I realize they don't really understand it. Well, at that time, I was taking a course from Zahner, a solid state guy, on Brillouin zones. We've been at it for 2 weeks. And I never did and still don't understand what it was about. So I mentioned to Fermi, I said, well, what about Brillouin zones? And he had a little blackboard in his office, about a 4x5 old-fashioned blackboard. He went up to the thing and started, back and back, developed the whole theory of Brillouin zones, just like that, out of the blue. And he was just a most amazing guy. And I think of any of his peer group that knew him, Beta, all the rest of them, would agree to that. On this business of people, he said there are people who you try to tell something and they immediately say, yeah, I understand. But he said they really don't. And then he said something which really shook me. He said Oppie was one of these people. In the sense of Fermi understanding, which I think was quite unique. Of all the people he associated with, his favorite was Teller. And their personalities were absolutely different. Now, Marshall Rosenbluth told me a story when he did his orals. On his team was Fermi and Teller, because Rosenbluth had been a student of Teller's. So Marshall got up and started to talk about his thesis. He was interrupted by Fermi, who started talking to Teller about Rosenbluth's thesis. And Marshall said he just stood there, and after about 10 or 15 minutes, Fermi turns to Edward and said, Edward, you pass. Marshall, you pass too. And that's all there was to it. Well,
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, we have one more.
yeah.
So this is another question about Fermi, and you talked a lot about his knowledge and everything, but I guess there was a story about the experiment at Stagg Field where you were getting to a critical part of the measurement, and it was getting to be late in the morning, and
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah,
Fermi
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
very systematic about it, and he
Right.
said, break for lunch. Were you there?
Oh,
Or
yes,
could
I
you-
was there. I
Could
was
you relate
there.
any stories about
No,
that?
it was just, well, we were told, what happened is, we had 2 shifts building that CP1. I worked on it for quite a while. I really didn't like it. Graphite is heavy, it's dirty, it's slippery. You got to be very careful. It slides. You can really get your fingers pinched. And your knees are all blackheads in your knees from crawling on top of this graphite. Anyway, I got out of that and started working with radium beryllium sources. But come the day of what happened was, Fermi the day shift was Wally Zinn, the night shift was Herb Anderson, and I guess the day before is December 2nd, is it? Or the 7th, I can't remember. One was Pearl Harbor, the other was a year later. Fermi told Herb how many layers to put on, where to put this stuff. Fermi did all this, a little slide rule, telling everybody how to build that thing. And he told Herb to close up, and we'd start up again the next morning. We started up the next morning about 10 o'clock. George Weil was down in the pit pulling out a meter stick that had a cadmium strip on it. There were other control rods, all have been taken out. Hanging over this thing were 2 big 5-gallon carboys of cadmium nitrate or cadmium sulfate, or something that Sam Allison and Warren Nyer were there. They had an axe and was hanging on a rope. And the thing was, if things went bananas. See, we didn't know there was such thing as delayed neutrons. If there hadn't been delayed neutrons, we'd been in deep trouble, because that's what allows you to control the reactor. We didn't know that. So Fermi is there. He has this little 6-inch slide rule, and he tells George Weil, pull out the yardstick another couple of centimeters. And then we would watch, there was a source in the center of CP1, and we'd watch the counting rate increase, and we had at that time scalers and mechanical recorders. They go clunk, clunk, clunk after 64 counts. And finally that got so that mechanical cords couldn't keep up, so then we had in the old days you had soot on a rotary thing with a stylus on it, and we watched an ionization chamber, which watched the intensity rising and rising, and the things are still jammed, the clickers are still jammed, but we saw this rising and rising, and Fermi would tell George, okay, pull it out a little bit further, a little bit further. Then finally about 11:30 he says, okay, put it in, we're going to go for lunch. We were all absolutely stunned. And we all went over to the commons. Fermi, we always went together, his little group, to the commons at lunch, went through the cafeteria. That was Fermi's way. I think the other academics there would go to the faculty club, but Fermi always liked his young people. Actually, at one of those luncheons, Fermi got to worrying about heavy water in Norway. He says, oh, I've got to do something about that. And I think he was the one that started the initiative on the part of those brave Norwegians to scuttle the ship that was bringing the heavy water to Germany. That started at lunch one day in the Chicago Commons. Anyway, we went to lunch, came back after lunch, and we started where we were before, and he had George pulling out this thing, and finally it was pretty clear this thing was really going, and he finally said, okay, zip in, and that's all there was to it. And Wigner had a bottle of Chianti, which he offered drinks. I went back to work. I didn't, people say, do you remember what's the implications of this and all that? No, I didn't. I just thought, well, this is just another one of Fermi's experiments, and it worked. I had no reason to doubt that it wasn't going to work, and I just went back to work. I didn't really appreciate the significance of that. Some people will tell you, oh yes, they thought how important in the world, and a bunch of baloney. Anyway, that's true. He did interrupt it, went to lunch. And that's the way it was. And hopefully someday people will realize that nuclear waste is not a problem and nuclear power is something we really need. Okay, thanks very much for coming. Thank you.